few things in Parshas Bo that I want to finish up today so we get on to B'Shalach tomorrow. Something that we skipped. I was checking through my notes. There's something we skipped in the very beginning. And take a look at Perek Yud Pasuk Vav. I don't know why we skipped this. A few points that we skipped here. Perek Yud Pasuk Vav is on page 340. Page 340. So you have a very big question here because you got these locusts coming in. Now locusts are as natural an occurrence. Locusts happen all over the place. Locusts happen all the time. And the whole point here is that Paro should notice that this is not a natural occurrence. And if you take a look in page 342 for a second, take a look at how the command comes. 6 lines from the bottom. 6 lines from the top, 6 lines from the top. It says, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Everybody see that? 6 lines from the top of page 342. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Netei yodcha al eretz Mitzrayim. Stretch your hand out, ba'arbe. V'ya'al al eretz Mitzrayim. The yochal is called Esav Ha'aretz, is called Asher Yishur Abba, is going to consume all the produce. And then what does Moshe do? Vayet Moshe es mateo al eretz Mitzrayim. He stretches out his staff. And now watch this. This is the part that gets a little strange. V'Hashem nihag ruach kodim ba'aretz kol hayomahu v'chol hayil. Hashem brought an east wind. Haboker hayav ruach kodim nosas arba. And by morning, the east wind brought in all the locusts. Well, that's how locusts are always brought in. Locusts are always brought in with an east wind. And not only that, what I saw one of the commentaries say, well, you know, the east wind blows them from the other lands that Egypt is surrounded by, and it blows them over the borders into Egypt. So, how is Paro supposed to? I mean, locust happens at all time. We had a locust attack in Israel a couple of years ago in the south of Israel. There were locusts. It was unbelievable what it looked like. People running it. You can't. You know, they come swarming in the billions. And so how's Paro supposed to know that this is not a natural occurrence? Especially when the Torah says that a wind blows them in. So if he would just go poof, and they would appear out of the clear, poof, then he got billions of arbas. I know it's a natural occurrence. You know, but if they come out of, he says, poof, and they come out of the woodwork in the houses. They were hiding in the closets all the time. So it's a natural occurrence. But over here, the wind blows them, and then they come in. Well, how does locusts always come? They always come with the wind. They always come with the wind. Number one. Number two, we find that by the Red Sea also. By Kriyas Yamsuf, what does it say? It says the wind blew all night, and then the sea split. So what's with the wind over here? So the commentaries point out, we didn't speak about this, right? We never spoke about it. The commentaries point out over here that this is what allows anybody. You want to believe. You don't want to believe, God says, I'll give you an excuse not to believe if you want. You want to be cynical? You want to be facetious? Here, take a look. You could come up and say, oh, the wind blew. The wind blew. It was a natural occurrence. Oh, the wind blew. The sea split. But that doesn't account for the fact that the wind blew just when Moshe Rabbeinu told it to blow. That's where the miracle, if you want to see the miracle, you can see the miracle. If Moshe Rabbeinu goes like that, and all of a sudden the sea splits, at the moment that he pointed, yeah, but it was because of the wind. So why did it happen right when he still is there? You could choose to see or choose not to see. Anybody who wants to be people say, why doesn't Hashem do miracles for us nowadays? If it did miracles for us, there are miracles. There are plenty of miracles. Where a guy has a machine gun and he tries to shoot up a restaurant last night, and the machine gun jams after the first bullet, and therefore he has to run away and can't shoot up a whole bunch of sitting ducks and everything. That's not a miracle. That isn't a miracle. You can't. What do you call it? That's not a miracle. So you want to be a skeptic. You can be anybody. Hashem says, "I'm going to leave it for you. I'm going to make it. I don't want to tilt the scales to what. I'll let you be a skeptic if you want to be a skeptic, but you don't have to be. But where is the proof? Where is the proof? So the proof is in the previous page. If you take a look, look at how it works when they come in. In Pasuk Vav, 7 lines from the bottom on page 340. So Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu how this plague is going to happen. The locusts are going to come, the arba are going to come. Umolu batecha, they'll fill your house, your palace. Ubate kol avadecha, the houses of all your inner circle. Bate, remember we said avadecha means the close advisors, the inner circle of Paro. Ubate kol Mitzrayim, then the houses of all the outlying areas, all the common people. You know, if locusts come over a border, So what are they going to do first? Where does Paro live? The king always lives inland. And he's surrounded, the people closest to him are the aristocracy and his advisors and everybody else. And then in the outlying areas, you have the rural areas, you have all the common people. Well, what does the Torah say? Moshe says, you know how they're going to come in? They're going to go flying over the border, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to fill Paro's palace. I don't know, like a locust that you've met. I've met certain locusts. They're not picky about what they eat. It's not like they fly over and say, well, that field looks pretty good, but let's see what Paro's got in the fridge, right? And they fly into the palace. They would stop right there and start eating their way in, not work from the middle and eat their way out. Locusts don't do that. Like locusts, have you heard locusts go flying in. First thing they see, they start and they shave it down. They leave it, they consume. I told you, it's a farmer's nightmare. So the supernatural, if you're looking to see how this is beyond natural law, look how Hashem says it's going to happen. They're going to start with they're going to go to fly straight to the palace. And they got a great, what do you call it? They got ways, right? Straight to the palace. And then they're going to eat their way out, right? Locusts don't do that. That's the sign that the locusts are supernatural. That I don't know why we didn't mention that. That was a vital idea. Okay, so then we had the plague of darkness. And then you have the plague of the firstborn. Now, if you take a look on page 346. So Moshe is standing in front of Paro. The last thing we have spoken about the stature of Moshe Rabbeinu, that we spoke about, right? The Meshech Chochmah, about how we determine the stature of people, right? How we determine the Gedolim. We spoke about that? That we spoke about, right. Okay, so that's exactly where we left off. Now, if you take a look on page 346, 8 lines from the top. Vayomer Moshe, Ko amar Hashem, kachatzos halayla ani yotzei be'eretz b'soch Mitzrayim. At midnight, I'm going to go out in Egypt. Umeis kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim. Every firstborn is going to die. Mi bechor Paro hayoshev al kiso, the firstborn of Paro, the crown prince. Yoshev al kiso means the one who's supposed to take over the throne. Ad bechor hashifcha asher acharayim, the firstborns of even the maidservants who were also happy to see the Jews get beaten around. V'chol bechor behema, the firstborns of the animals, because they worshipped animals. You see how timeless the Torah is. You see how timeless the Torah is, because we go to India today, right? Cows are sacred. In India, cows are sacred. Right? Not only cows are sacred, I told you I had a Talmud here who became a Mashiach kashrus supervisor. Kashrus Mashiach, so they had a lot of factories in India. So he went to India, and I asked him I couldn't wait for him to come back. He came back from India doing the supervision in the factories over there. They got all these factories over in India, Indonesia, and China. There's factories that produce all the kosher, the chemicals and all the zachin. So I said to him when he was in India, I said, did you see any idol worship? So he said to me, Rabbi, if it moves, they worship it. That's what he said. They worship rodents and snakes, and they worship everything. I have a what do you call it? Which is true. They worship everything. And I remember the way he said it. He said, Rabbi, if it moves, they worship it. That was his. So I have a friend of mine lives across the street from me. He's actually from India originally. He's a big Talmid Chacham. So I once said to him, what was it like in India? He said, in India, you can't go to a park. If you go to a public park in India, you have a regular park, you can't bend down to tie your shoes without checking first to see if you're not facing an idol. So they're all over the place. He says, yeah, and even if you can't bend down in front of an idol, even to check your shoes, to tie your shoes, you got to make sure you turn away. He says, if you bend down, chances are you're facing an idol. And you got to make sure that you're facing in a direction where there are no idols there. By the way, if you ever go to the airport, and they have this prayer room, I thought it was called interdenominational room or something? Interdenominational room. Yeah. Don't go in there to daven. Why? Because chances are somebody has worshipped something in that room which we wouldn't agree with. Right, that room, if it's interdenominational, goodness knows what's been worshipped in there. Go find the corner of the airport and daven. Don't daven in it. I would daven in a bathroom before I would daven in an interdenominational room. That I could tell you. Because I wouldn't set foot go near there with a 10-foot pole. Because I'm sure somebody's worshipped. Not only somebody's worshipped something, somebody's probably left something there. Somebody's deposited something there. Probably walk in there, you see a statue or a cross or something in there. Who knows what you're going to find in there? I wouldn't go in there. That's as tummy as a McDonald's is trafe. Right? I wouldn't go anywhere near there. Okay, yeah, Mayor, what were we going to ask?
Yeah, just a quick joke that the same principle applies for Chinese, but whatever it moves, they eat.
It's true, by the way. A lot of that, but that had to do. That had to do with a lot of that had to do with because of the starvation, because they went through periods of famine in China, and then they are just desperate, so you ate anything. I had a guy told me when I went to Australia the first time, so I flew via Hong Kong. I had a stopover in Hong Kong for about 4 or 5 hours. So there's an older man who used to travel a lot for yeshivas. He used to go to Hong Kong a lot. So when he found out I was in Hong Kong, he was all excited. He goes, "Did you go touring around?" I said, No, there's very little that I want to see in Hong Kong, and there's very little I want to see anywhere in the world other than a basketball game. There's very little that I want to see. So no, I didn't go to. He said, "Oh, you missed it. They have an open air market in Hong Kong, what they call the Shuk HaShrutzim. They have like the bug market, right? Like you go into stores here in Israel and they have these open, sunflower seeds, pistachio nuts, that sort of thing. He says they have these displays, and you go in there and you say, well, I'll take 100 grams of the little black crawlers, and I'll take 250 grams of the little red stretchios over there, the worms and the thing, and they put it in a bag. He said it's fascinating. He said it's absolutely fascinating. I'll tell you the truth, between me and you, I'll let somebody else go there and watch it. I don't need to go. I don't need to do that. It's enough for me to see them crawling around on my kitchen floor and have to spray them. That's good. I've had more than my fill. I don't need that. But what do you call it? They have what's called, and the reason is that a lot of it became because they were absolutely desperate. They're absolutely desperate in China. They're desperate. So here he says to them, they're all going to die. Now pay attention carefully. There's going to be a yell in Egypt. Asher kamolo niyev v'chamolo sosif. There's never going to be a scream like this ever. Ulechol b'nei Yisrael. Why is that? Because there's not going to be anywhere that anybody's not going to die. Later on it says ein bias when it actually happens. This is just a warning. Later on during the implementation it says the Egyptians screamed ki ein bias asher ein sham meis. There wasn't a house where nobody died. And Rashi says if there wasn't a firstborn, then the most prominent one in the house died. And not only that, there were certain houses where more than one guy died. Why? Because the Egyptian women were very promiscuous. So the Egyptian women, they had affairs with single men. So they may have had 7 children, and each one of them was a firstborn to a different father. Wow. So I saw Victor Miller says not only they were screaming because people were dying, but they were also screaming because a lot of wives were getting beaten up by their husbands. Right? Like, whoa, that's not my kid? You mean Anwar's not mine? No. And I got news for you, neither is Waleed. Are you serious? And neither is Ahmed. Are you out here? So there are a lot of husbands yelling, a lot of women are yelling, and this is besides everybody's dying. They're all over the place there, right? And people are dying over it. Now, comes along the Torah says something very puzzling. Ulechol b'nei Yisrael lo yecheratz kelev l'shono. No dog will wag his tongue to the Jewish people. And wagging his tongue, the Kaplan say, no dog's going to bark at the Jewish people. So that you should know how Hashem divided between, he distinguished between Mitzrayim and the Jewish people. Now, what's the significance? Okay, the dogs didn't bark. This begs there's certain questions that come out over here. First of all, we see later on the Torah says when you have an animal that became treif, later on in Parsha, in Vayikra, I think it is, the Torah says, La kelev tashlichun oso. When you have an animal that becomes treif, an animal that died of its wounds or an animal that wasn't shechted properly, you throw it to the dogs. It says throw it to the dogs, you're not allowed to eat it. You chuck it to the dogs. And the commentary of the Gemara says the dogs were rewarded. Why were they rewarded? For not wagging their tongues, not barking at the Jewish people. So the nation of dogs, right, like they've ever heard of, there's what's called Cubs Nation. There's called Cubs Nation. We weren't Cub fans, we were called Cub Nation, right? There's Dog Nation. The White Sox fans, they're called right? Dog Nation, right? So the dogs get rewarded, which obviously begs the question, which is what? Oh, dogs don't have free choice. Dogs don't have free choice. The dogs didn't wag their tongues. It's because Hashem didn't let them wag their tongues. And why should the dogs bark? So there are 2 reasons why dogs should have barked. Number 1, where there are dead bodies around, dogs get all excited. Right? Dogs go for dead bodies. number one. Number two, the dog's sense. We have sources that talk about the dog's sense spiritual things like shadim, when there's anything spiritual lurking. Not only that, the Gemara says if you hear the dogs barking, that Eliyahu Hanavi could be in town. The dogs get all excited. The dogs are laughing. Eliyahu Hanavi's in town. The Gemara says, but that's only if there are no female dogs around. Right? If there are female dogs around, that's why they're getting all hippity up. Right? But if not, then it could be Eliyahu Hanavi. But the dogs have a sense for the occult. We find this for anything that's spiritual. The dogs have more of a sense. The angel of death is around. He's lurking. And the dogs sense it before. The Gemara says dogs sense that. So if the angel of death around, it's not like you go, oh, hi, how are you doing? It's going to, it's going to be that, that frantic barking. And there's no barking here to scare the Jewish people. There's no barking here to scare the Jewish people. So why did the dogs get rewarded? So why should they get rewarded? They don't have free choice. The answer is you're right. You're right. Obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a manipulation here, which we're going to speak about in a second. There's a certain manipulation here as well. But the idea is that the Torah wants to show us a lesson. So here you go with the thumbs, the Kal V'chomer. If even dogs, which have no free choice, and they're going to get rewarded, so all the more so, people with free choice, if we do what's right, certainly we're going to get rewarded. It's a way of teaching us a lesson, which is sometimes why you find accounts of angels who get either rewarded or punished. And angels don't have free choice. There's no such thing as free choice by angels. The angel who is rewarded or being punished, that's also something angels are accomplishing. It's an agency. It's a shlichus for the angel. That's to show us if even an angel is rewarded, then certainly a human being is going to be rewarded when we exercise our free choice properly in difficult situations. And for us, it's much more difficult than anybody else. So the dogs don't bark at the Jewish people, and the different dogs are going to get rewarded. But even more than that, why does Hashem do this? It's not just not to frighten the Jewish people. It's not just so the Jewish people shouldn't be scared. The Gemara says you shouldn't even own a nasty dog, because a dog barks. A dog barks. You discourage people from visiting your house, which is why some people have dogs. Right? You discourage visitors. You certainly discourage. You certainly discourage what you call. I certainly recommend that you should at least have a recording of a Doberman barking, so that if your wife is home alone and some guy knocks on the door, and she could first turn on the tape, and then you hear the Doberman bark. You say, "Yes, can I help you? My husband's not home right now." And you hear, so that will certainly make sure that everybody stays safe. That's certainly a what do you call it? But you discourage visitors. Number one, number two, a dog barking could cause a miscarriage. And Gemara says a woman was walking past, the dog barked, and she miscarried. And then the guy said to her, "Well, don't worry, he doesn't bite." She says, "Well, it's too late. It's too late. I've already miscarried." Right, so a dog could frighten the heck out of people. A dog could scare the heck. You walk past, all of a sudden there's yards. I remember in America, you walk past and it's quiet. You're walking, mind your own business, and all of a sudden you hear running in a bar, a fear. The German Shepherd. You're terrified. You can terrify the daylights out of you. So that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't do is the Jewish people shouldn't be terrified. But it's more than that. What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrating over here? He's demonstrating that the will of the most powerful emperor in the world and the will of a dog is all in Hashem's hands. Paro is going to be sending out the Jewish people because Hashem is manipulating his will. And the dogs aren't going to bark because Hashem is manipulating their will. That means there's a lesson for us that everything is under, unless the exception is when somebody behaves foolishly. If he behaves foolishly, that's already Hashem leaves. It's all under Hashem's jurisdiction. But if a person decides to do something foolish, so the Gemara says, "Hakol bidei Shemaim." Everything's in Hashem's hands, chutz mitzinin pachin, except for what really means like colds and flu and fevers. That means if a person goes out in sub-zero weather in February, in sub-zero weather with his hair wet and no shirt, and he runs outside, and then he gets pneumonia the next day, and he says, "It must be bashert." Right, he learned a Yiddish word. Right, it's the will of Hashem. Hashem doesn't will that you should be a fool. Don't blame Hashem when you do something reckless and careless. Right? Oh, it must be Bashir. A guy was skiing and he fell off the side of a mountain. Oh, it was Bashir. I don't know. Nobody playing chess broke their leg in 4 places. So don't start blaming Hashem for every foolish thing I did. But everything is under Hashem's jurisdiction, whether it's an emperor, the most powerful ruler, monarch in this ancient world, or when it comes to even the barking of a dog, what we call the most insignificant creature. But you're 100% right. Animals do not have free will. That's the difference. The animals, no matter what you see them do, and sometimes, you see a guy starts up with the owner and the dog goes and bites the guy in the leg, he bites the guy. That's not the animal, he's the Hatzalah, the dog Hatzalah committee. It's not like he has a free will over it. He's trained. This is my owner, and that's how a dog instinctively goes and bites people who hassle with the owner. Remember I told you the guy once asked me, this guy fell out of a boat in the Gulf of Mexico. Remember I told you the guy fell out of a boat in the Gulf of Mexico and he was surrounded by sharks, which is bad. You understand? Try to avoid that when possible. He was surrounded by sharks, and then a bunch of dolphins came, and they surrounded him, and they beat up the sharks, and they escorted him to dry land. So a guy asked me, do the dolphins get schar? Do the dolphins get rewarded for that because they saved the guy? The answer is dolphins are programmed to be. Dolphins go after sharks all the time. Dolphins and sharks fight each other. They torpedo themselves at the sharks. That's how they beat. They torpedo themselves at the sharks' gills. And the sharks, they smash their gills so the sharks can't take in water. They basically suffocate. They can't breathe. Yeah, but they're programmed. It's not a mitzvah. The dolphin didn't do a mitzvah. Let's save the guy today.
They're programmed to escort him?
Well, he says they escorted him. You say, we don't. No, I don't doubt it, but we don't. All these stories, are they programmed to? It could be that when they say human being, that they swim with a human being. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the escort means. It wasn't like they took him on board and gave him dried clothing. He still had to swim. He still had to get the shorts. I don't know exactly how that works. But whatever it is, they don't have free choice. There's no free choice over there, and therefore the dogs don't deserve reward as a dog. Bilam's donkey spoke, but it didn't have free choice. It wasn't an intelligence speaking. Words, Hashem, it says openly. Hashem opened its mouth and the words came out. So it looks impressive when a donkey speaks. I've seen human beings. The same thing, right? But it looks impressive. It looks impressive that the words come out of a donkey's mouth, right? But the difference is that human beings are supposed to have intelligence. Okay. So then Then the Torah breaks off, and the Torah goes to a mitzvah called the Korban. Meir had a question? No. The Torah goes to a mitzvah called the Korban Pesach. Okay. Now this is a remarkable, and this is also something that extremely fundamental here. The Torah starts on page 350, and the Torah says like this. Before we get to the Korban Pesach, the Torah talks about the entire procedure. Turn to page 350. There are a few points here we want to see. So first of all, the Torah says that while all this is going on, the Torah says that they're going to take the sheep. And the reason they take a sheep is because a sheep was something that was worshipped by the Egyptians. Now, there are those that say they didn't literally worship the sheep; they worshiped the constellation that corresponds to the sheep. What's it called in the zodiac? The ram. What's his name? What? Aries, right? They're Aries, right? They take this ram, and they worship the ram, and the physical representation of the ram, the physical representation of the constellation, is the sheep. So worshiping the sheep means some sort of connection to that constellation. An idea like that. It was something a little more spiritual. But the Jews take their sheep, and they're going to slaughter the sheep. Now watch this. While Egyptian firstborns are dying, the Jews are going to be eating Korban Pesach. Now, there's no coincidence over here. Take a look at page 350, first of all. 3 lines from the bottom. Ve'achlu es habasar balayla hazeh. They're going to eat the meat on this night. Tzli eish, roasted meat. Umatzos al merorim yochluhu. They're going to eat it with matzah and bitter herbs. So they're going to roast this sheep. Now, what's happening? Let's think what's happening simultaneously in Egypt. There are firstborns dying. And while these firstborns dying, you can't cook it. You can't cook the ram. You can't cook the sheep. And you can't eat it raw. What do they call it? Steak tartare, right? Just a fancy way of saying raw meat, right? You can't, what do you call it? Look at the bottom page, the bottom puzzle. Al tochlu mimenu no, uvashal v'mushal v'mayim. You can't eat it raw and you can't eat it cooked in a pot, right? The Aries can't be in the pot, because then you'd have Aries potter, right? So you can't put Aries in the pot, right? Ki'im tzli eish, rosho al krov al kirbo. You got to roast it whole. You got to roast it whole. Very interesting coincidence here. You roast it whole. So you got the plague of the firstborns. And you got a bunch of Jews who are roasting lamb meat. Right? What's the difference between roasted meat and cooked meat? First of all, it tastes better. Tastes better. Juicier, tastes better, right? Roast meat, nothing better than some roast lamb. Number one. Number two, when somebody's roasting something, you can smell it all over the place. Never happened to you? You're walking outside, smell like somebody's having a barbecue back there. Why wasn't I invited? Right? That's always the reaction. Whenever there's a barbecue, why am I not involved there? There's something about a barbecue. So they're going to roast the lambs now. Now, while they're roasting lambs, Egyptian firstborns are dying. Okay? And it's got to be roasted whole. Can't put it in a pot. Can't cut it up. Got to be roasted whole. Now, can you imagine a couple of Egyptians are walking on the street, and all of a sudden they hear screaming. They each run. They go running towards their house. People are dying. So what's the first reaction under those circumstances? You got no choice but to call out to your God. Right? Well, let's call out to our God. And all of a sudden, oh, man, Waleed, man, what's that smell? I know, Anwar. Smells like roasted deity. That's roasted deity. So they're not sure that's what it smells like. Their God is burning. So what do? They run over to a Jewish house. He bends down, he steps on his back. They have a look through the window. He says, what's roasting in there? He says, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Oh, boy, it's roasted whole. How do you like that? There's no mistaking it for a turkey. Right? It's roasted whole. There's no question in their mind that their God is being roasted, which is a reminder to the Jews of the insignificance of the Egyptian God, and it's a reminder to the Egyptians of the insignificance of the Egyptian God. And that's the first idea of the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is, while they're dying, let's all get it clear that they're helpless. Their gods are helpless. And that's the roasting. That's the idea of roasting a Korban Pesach. But even more than that, look what the Jews are supposed to do in the process. And this, we're going to have to do a little research here, gentlemen. Take a look on 350, 5 lines from the bottom. Fascinating insight from Rabbi Yeshivat Ohr. 350, 5 lines from the bottom. It says, V'lakchu min adam, they take the blood of this Korban Pesach, v'nosnu al shtei ha-mezuzos v'al ha-mashkof. They put it on the two, we call the mezuzah. People mistakenly think that the piece of parchment that goes up there is the mezuzah, or that the case is the mezuzah is the doorpost. The doorpost, that's why it's called a mezuzah, because it goes on the doorpost. So it says they take the blood, and they apply the blood from the Korban Pesach that they've slaughtered in their homes. They apply it on the two doorposts. Ve'al ha-mashkof. The mashkof is the lintel, the cross beam. And they take the blood and they apply it on the two mezuzahs and on the cross beam. Now, if you take a look at Pasuk 22, which is on page 354. That's Hashem giving Moshe the instructions. And now Moshe talks to the Jewish people. And at the bottom of page 354, Moshe says, Ulakachtem agudas ezo, very bottom of the page, take the bundle of hyssop, utvaltem badam asher basaf, you dip it into the blood which is in the basin, Vihigatem el hamashkof ve'el shtei hamezuzos. I want you to reach it up to the lintel and to the two mezuzos, the two doorposts. Notice what changed between Pasuk Zayin and Pasuk Chav Beis. What changed? In Pasuk Zayin and Pasuk Chav Beis, what changed? First, Vihigatem is there, which means you should reach it. What else? Okay, but what else? The order is changed. In Pasuk Zayin it says you apply it to the doorposts and to the crossbeam. In Pasuk 22 it says you reach it to the crossbeam and to the doorposts. It reverses the crossbeams and the doorposts. So Rav Yeshivat Ohr says there are two principles at work here. First of all, there's a medrash. The medrash says that the two doorposts and the crossbeam represent Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The two doorposts are Yitzchak and Yaakov, and the one all the way at the top, the crossbeam, is Avram Avinu. Number one, that this is all in the merit of the Avos. Number one. Number two, the Gemara says a person has to say Chayiv kol adam lomar. A person has to say, you don't have to say it out loud. You certainly have to think it. Masai yagiu maisai lemaisei avosai. When am I going to reach the level of my forefathers? Something we're supposed to keep in mind, that we're striving to reach the level of our forefathers. Now, are we going to become like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? The odds are against us. but we should be constantly striving forward, striving upward. So the Torah is telling you that in this process of striving, there are two aspects of it. Aspect number one is the practical implementation. The first time the Torah speaks about the practical implementation, how do you do it? You go to the two doorposts and work your way up till you get to the crossbeam. That means that when serving, every mitzvah that we do and we try to grow as a Jew, you grow in an organized method upwards. You don't jump too far at one time. You start here, we build ourselves up some more, till we reach even higher levels. We don't start out and learn how to read Aleph Beis and the next day try to have all the Kabbalistic intent when every time we make a bracha. You start out over here, and we work our way up and gradually get to the point. I just heard about a big Kabbalist who made a bracha. He was at a wedding, and he was honored with making a bracha under the chuppah. Somebody was at the wedding. He said it took him about 20 minutes to make the bracha. Because as he went, Baruch, because he had every one of the Arizal's kavanas in mind when he was making the bracha. Okay, he's holding at that level. By the time he said Baruch, I would have finished the whole benching, right? But he's and the meal, right? Okay, but that's he's holding at that level. You have to work your way up. It starts with the two mezuzahs, and then you get to the door, to the crossbeam. But look at Pasuk 22. Pasuk 22 is a reminder, but what ultimately are we trying to reach? Vihigatem, what are you trying to reach? What are you trying to reach ultimately? El Hamashkof, to the Avram Avinu is all the way up on top. That's ultimately what we're trying to reach. That's not how we do it practically. Practically, we start bottom and work our way up. But make sure you're focused on a goal. Knowing that there's somewhere where you're trying to get to always makes it, you have to work our way up. But we have to give ourselves a target. There's got to be a target. And the target is all the way up there. He got them all the way up to Avram Avinu. Okay? Number two. Number three, if you take a look at this Korban Pesach, so I want to show you something remarkable here, okay? This is from the Sefer HaChinuch, and it skips around a little bit. I'm not going to go through the psukim, but it starts in Pasuk Vav. What are the requirements of the Korban Pesach? So first of all, there are a few rules here, okay? I'm going to read the rules to you. Number one, it has to be roasted. Korban Pesach has to be roasted. Number two, in order to eat the Korban Pesach, it has to be a pre-designated group. You eat it with your family. You could have a guest. You could eat with another family. But it has to be designated before the Korban Pesach is shechted. That means we have to decide, you, and me, we're all together in the Korban Pesach. Now, you could join out. You could skip out and go to another group until the Korban is shechted. But once we're in and it's shechted, then you have to stay with this group. Okay? Number three, there are no leftovers. If it's low, any meat that's left over from the Korban Pesach has to be burnt the next day. Number four, you don't take it out. You're not allowed to take it out. The home that the Korban Pesach is, you're not allowed to take any roast meat out. You can't take it out of the home. And number five, you can't break any bones in the Korban Pesach. If you cut it, you have to cut right through where the joints connect. And when you eat it, you can't break any bones. Those are 5 rules by the Korban Pesach. There's also a rule that anybody who's not circumcised cannot eat the Korban Pesach. That we'll get to. What is the idea of all these rules? The Torah goes in, it's the first sacrifice over here. The Torah, you sprinkle the blood on the doorposts and then we eat it. So first of all, the idea of sprinkling on the doorposts and eating it, up until this point, every offering that's ever been brought has been a korban olah in the Torah, a completely burnt offering. The offering, you take an animal and you bring it, even Yitzchak at the Akedah, if God Rabbi would have succeeded in slaughtering him, he would have been completely burnt. This is the first time a korban is eaten. How do you like that? People are going to eat the korban. Now, at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, what would happen? You would slaughter the animal, sprinkle the blood on the Mizbeach, and then you burn the innards on the Mizbeach. That means that the Jewish homes over here are representative of an altar and the Jewish people are representative of an altar. You're sprinkling, the blood is being painted on the doorposts, and the Jewish people themselves are consuming the animal instead of the fires of the Mizbeach. That's the level they've reached here in Mitzrayim, that they are now essentially every Jewish home is an altar, and the Jewish people themselves are acting as a Mizbeach. That's the level they've reached, number one. Number two, we go to the Pesach Seder. Now, nowadays we don't have the Korban Pesach, but theoretically, at the Pesach Seder, what would we normally be eating? In the time of the Pesach Seder, what would you eat at the Pesach Seder? We'd be eating roasted lamb, right? You know, when we have that korech part where Hillel wraps up the romaine lettuce and you eat the romaine lettuce sandwich. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there would be roast lamb in there. That I could get used to, and the meat they bring out at the Pesach Seder wouldn't be cooked chicken like we have now. They would be eating roast lamb. Oh, now you're talking, Now, what are we supposed to represent? What are we supposed to be like when you go to Pesach Seder? What's it supposed to be symbolic of? It's supposed to be symbolic. We're supposed to be aristocracy. You lean. Okay, nowadays we're not very careful when we lean. We're not very, very comfortable when we lean because we don't normally eat that way. But the old days, remember the picture of Cleopatra on the couch, That's how the people used to eat. That's what symbolizes the leaning. We're aristocracy. And we sit there at the table, we drink wine, and we have the fanciest dishes and silverware. And you bring out all the fancy stuff. We're supposed to represent aristocracy. So the Torah says, you know what? I'm going to help you be aristocrats. Jews at a Kiddush is not exactly how aristocracy, eating a piece of kugel, eating a piece of kugel and some herring is not, while you're schmoozing with your friend. I try to kid, we could sometimes do better than that. Now, I have nothing against eating a piece of kugel, but that's not, that's kind of informal. When it comes to aristocracy, so look at it's no coincidence here. First of all, the meat has to be eaten roasted. How do poor people eat meat? Poor people eat meat, chicken. How do they eat it? They cook it. You know why? Because when you cook it, it expands. It absorbs the water, expands. When you roast meat, what happens to it? Shrivels. I remember you take a pound of hamburger meat, you put it on a thing, you roast it, and where did it all go? But aristocrats aren't counting their money. They're not counting their pennies. So you eat it, now it tastes best. It tastes best. So aristocrat, number one, it has to be roasted. Number two, you have to eat with your group. What does that represent? Invitation only. It's only members on invitation only. This is, you got to be invited. This isn't just like let's crash, right? You're invited. It's very formal, very formal. We're invited, aristocrats. You don't just go in and join the ball where the Queen of England has a ball with all these ambassadors. You don't just come in, hi! Are there any extra polkies here? No, just go walk in there and come in and have a Pepsi. It doesn't work that way. It's very, very, very formal. Very formal. Number three, no leftovers. Because aristocrats don't eat leftovers. They have fresh food every day. There's leftovers, you burn it. Don't even what is this? Eating leftover? Where you leave it, you're saving for the next day? This isn't a Kollel family, right? Aristocrats, listen, I got news for you. I know people who eat chont till Tuesday. They eat Shabbos, nothing gets thrown out. Now, I made it clear to my wife years ago, I don't do leftovers. Right, I just don't like. I don't do leftovers. I'm very picky, and my wife said, your mother's always said to you, it tastes just like fresh, right? They warm it up, and who knows what they do in the kitchen with all the who goodness knows what goes on in there, and then they tell you it tastes just like fresh, right? We were all told as kids. I told my wife, if it tastes just like fresh, give it to the kids. I mean, I want the real fresh, not what tastes like fresh, right? So I put a stop to that a long time ago. Aristocrats don't eat leftovers. Number four. You don't break any bones. Why would you break bones? Why do they have to tell us you don't break bones? No breaking bones in the Korban Pesach. Why is that? Because you know what? We're free. On Pesach night, we're supposed to be free. You know what the definition of freedom is? What's the real definition of freedom? Anybody know? Definition of freedom is your time is your own. When you're the boss, you're generally a free man. When you're employed, an employee, you're not a free person. Your time belongs to the boss. When you're married, you're not a free person because your time is not your own. Don't make any independent plans. So the guy told me his first 3 months of marriage. I said to the guy, what have you learned in your first 3 months of marriage? He's got this dazed look on his face. He goes, oh, don't make any independent plans. Because you're not a free man. Why would you be breaking bones? You break bones when you eat because you're in a hurry. I'm an aristocrat. I'm in no hurry over here. I'm a free man. I'm not in a hurry. Hold it. Somebody's like, hold it. I'm a free man. I have no rush over. There's no rush. Number one. Number two, breaking bones, even at a Shabbos table, you're sitting around, you finish the meal, and you're schmoozing around, you pick up a drumstick bone, and you crunch away at it a little bit, while I guarantee you, in a royal meal in England, nobody's crunching bones. They even have a rule there. I think when the queen stops eating, you stop eating. That would be tsar b'alechaim, mamish. That would be tsar b'alechaim. But she eats like a bird, and I got to stop eating. She probably goes back in the back room. She probably has like a sub sandwich waiting for her over there. Otherwise, the woman would disappear. Otherwise she'd disappear. So a free man is not in a hurry. And number 5, you don't take any meat out. Why don't you take any meat out? This is the most curious. This is the biggest sign of aristocracy of all. Do you ever see people go to a Chinese restaurant? 4 people sit down at a Chinese restaurant. Everybody orders something. So what happens? What is those? Oh, those are orange MSG poison something or others that are going to make you explode at 2 a.m. What are those? Yeah, and everybody's got their face on everybody's plate. Oh, can I taste some of those wonton somethings or others? Everybody. Why is that? Because it's a novelty. When it's wow, Chinese restaurant. Wow, what's that? And it's a novelty. When you go into a Jewish restaurant, it's not like, oh, what kind of roast chicken do you have? The same kind you have. Nobody's looking at anybody else's plate. It's basically roast chicken, potatoes, and maybe chont on Thursday night. That's basically what the menu is. Nobody's looking at everybody else's plate. Now, what would happen to you? Let's say you're the first guy into the lunchroom today. You're the first guy into the lunchroom. And you walk into the lunchroom, and the tables are laden with rib steaks. And there's a big sign that says, as many as you want, no limit. And you're the first guy in. What would you do? You'd pick one up and run. Itamar, what would you do? You'd pick one up in one hand, one in the other, a third in your mouth, and you'd come out and wave, hey guys, look what's for lunch. Why would you be so excited? Because this is a novelty. This is a novelty. You're sitting and eating roast lamb. You've been in Egypt all these years. I was like, hey, roast lamb. Hey guys, I'm not going to believe it. You're going to run outside with the roast lamb. That's not very aristocratic behavior. The Torah says, don't take it outside. Don't take it outside. Try for one night to behave. Try not to behave like you're in a Jewish chasna. Try for one night to behave. What do you go? One more point. One second. There's one more point. The Torah later on says that's the idea of all these rules. In other words, it's all part. It's all part. There's a method to this madness. It's not stam. There's one more point here, a vital point. It says you can't. Anybody who's not circumcised cannot eat from the korban pesach. How could you have a situation like that? Maybe somebody whose brother died from bris milah, never had a circumcision, somebody who decided not to circumcise. What's the connection? There's a common denominator between bris milah and it's a prerequisite. You have to be circumcised. What's the common denominator between bris milah and korban pesach? Does anybody know? What's the common denominator? What?
I think maybe the promise, the bris, essentially the promise that Hashem made, if you don't have that sign of the bris, then you can't take part in the fulfillment of that promise later on, which is essentially the korban pesach.
Why? What's the connection?
Well, if you don't have the sign of the bris, then Hashem doesn't owe you anything.
Okay. What? There's something else that the two have in common. A halacha they have in common.
I don't know the challah, but what I see is that in both cases, you're the offering, right? Something you mentioned.
You're getting close.
Is the idea that, anyways, that's the thought.
Good. The common denominator between the two of them is blood. There's blood at the bris milah and there's blood at the korban pesach when you slaughter it. Number one. Number two is another common denominator. There are only 2 positive commands. There are many negative commands where if you transgress, a person who transgress incurs premature death. He receives a kares penalty. There are only 2 positive commands. A person doesn't put on tefillin, he doesn't get kares. If a person doesn't take a lulav and esrog, he doesn't get kares. If a person doesn't wear tzitzis, he doesn't get kares. If a person neglects to have a bris milah, he's liable for kares. If a father didn't have his son circumcised, son is 13 years old, he's got an obligation to get himself circumcised. And if he doesn't, he's chayv kares. He incurs the kares penalty. A person's supposed to eat at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you had to be with a group and eat the korban pesach by midnight, by halachic midnight. If a person did not eat a piece of korban pesach by halachic midnight, and he had no good reason why not, he wasn't tamei and he wasn't in a different country and the person didn't eat kares, he's chayv kares. The 2 positive commands, right? Remarkably, what are the 2 mitzvahs that to this day, many Jews who are completely detached from Torah and mitzvahs, there are still 2 mitzvahs that they keep. One of them is circumcision, the other one is a Pesach Seder. Right? There's some connection. People feel that they identify at that level. So one of the ideas here is the bris milah was given to the individual Jew, Avram Avinu. It was the covenant between God and the individual Jew. Avram Avinu, he's the first one who got the Bris Milah. Korban Pesach is the first mitzvah that's given to the Jews as a nation. And the Torah is telling us, if you want to be counted as a member of the Jewish nation, not that you want to be counted, we're not talking about being halachically Jewish. You're halachically Jewish if you're Jewish. But you want to be considered a card-carrying member of the club, it's not enough to do what the group does, to enjoy Pesach and Purim and Hanukkah and all the fun stuff. You have to fulfill your individual obligations as a Jew in order to be considered a member of the club who then participates in Korban Pesach. The Bris Milah represents your obligations, whether it's easy, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, and many of it is so challenging. And you have, that's your individual. You can't be, I'm Jewish style. See, I'm part of the Jewish people because we also light Hanukkah candles. No, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. You want to be part of the Jewish people. You want to be a member of the club. You're a member of the club if you, You're a member of the club if you fulfill your individual, which is Bris Milah. Then you can participate in Korban Pesach. That's the symbolism. Okay, to be continued.